Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's 2 o'clock, and as mayor, I hereby call to order this special meeting of the Laconia City Council called for this hour on, what's today, the 23rd, March 23rd, 2017. And we'll note for the record that the minutes to today's meeting are being kept by City Clerk Mary Reynolds, and I would ask that she please call the roll.
Councilor Doyle.
Here.
Councilor Littman.
Present.
Councilor Bear.
Present.
Councilor Hamel.
Here.
Councilor Falk.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Edward Engler.
Present. Okay, the sole item on the agenda today is the issues we have discussed at the last meeting concerning the beautification project on Lakeside Avenue and the bearing of the utility lines and related endeavors. And I would recognize the city manager, Scott Myers, for an update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I can give you a little brief timeline if you'd like. This is in follow-up to a conversation we had at the council meeting on March 13th regarding a significant component of the Lakeside Avenue project dealing with putting the utility wires underground. Just to walk you through it very briefly, discussion started a little over a year ago when I was putting together the budget for the current fiscal year that we are in, about doing a major paving project and sidewalks, some drainage down on Lakeside. It was in conjunction with the water department needing to replace a significant amount of water main. We were exploring some sewer hookups in the area as well, and conversation came around, should we look at putting the utilities underground? And the city started the process of asking questions of what that would entail, what it would cost, how we would look to pay for it. And we engaged, obviously, a couple of partners, one being Eversource for the utility end of it, Paul Busby and Busby Construction for the construction end, some other partners in Fairpoint, MetroCast, and what else, everything was involved. So we started with Eversource for really a back-of-the-envelope number, a ballpark number to even see if it was something that was feasible. And they provided a number for us at that time, back in February of 2016, and the number was roughly $450,000. But again, that was just give us a number that we could start working with at this point. From there, we continued to develop some scopes of work, had conversations with the council about both the street improvements as well as as I described at the time, you get the basic project and you've got the enhanced project with some of the things we were talking about. There seemed to be support. We had a community meeting down at the Weirs Community Center on May 12th of last year to talk about doing this project with utilities underground, some enhancements potentially with sidewalks, bump outs, street lights, crosswalks, and the length of that project was slated to run from Route 3 at the Weirs sign all the way to Tower Street. As we continued to dig into some of the numbers, the council made commitment in late June to not only do the base project, which was part of the budget that you all adopted, but to also do the enhancements in an amount of $1.2 million. As things continued past June, a couple of things happened. One is we reached out to Eversource and said we're committed to go forward, and asked them to start designing how the conduit would be constructed underground in order to be able to have all the wires be placed underground. So at that point, we gave them a commitment, and the cost of that was $15,000, which we had paid. Through that time frame, we had an unexpected additional water main break on the area past Tower Street leading up to Foster, which meant that portion of the road was going to be disturbed, and conversations were held about, well, since we've already into the road and there's some repair work need to be done, why are we stopping at Tower Street? Let's look to see if we should continue the project up to Foster Street, again with the utilities underground and maybe some enhancements. We reached back to Eversource, and the rough estimate was approximately about a 20 to 25% increase for the utilities underground for that other stretch to the project. So now we were looking at, maybe a $560,000 price tag for the utilities underground portion of it. They continued on their work. with designing the conduit. The council had further discussions during September and maybe even into either late September or the first week in October, somewhere around there, about what the final project was going to look like, and agreed upon a $1.6 million enhancement project, again, above the base project, that focused on underground utilities, the bump outs, the crosswalks, but this time going all the way up to Foster Street. Eversource at that time was finalizing their estimates for their work of pulling the wires, again, separate from what Busby Construction was doing with putting the conduits and all of the infrastructure underground. And their firm number they came back to the city was $311,000, and that's the number that was shared, with all of you. And work continued through the fall. We got to the point where we were ready to, in essence, say the project is complete or substantially complete as far as the conduit underground, and asked Eversource to begin their portion of it with the wires. At that point, they went out to subs and to put the work out, not necessarily to bid, but to get sub prices, and the numbers came in far greater than we had used for budget estimates, and that number was $700,000 plus, so it was significantly over what we've done. My understanding is they went out and had a second contractor look at it and got a similar type of number. At that point, we had so much infrastructure in place, we were really kind of locked into a hard spot of needing to go forward with that project and keep on the time frame in order to allow the spring construction season for Busby to be in there, and having the poles gone at some point this spring, and for him to be able to do the sidewalk, do the curbing, do the crosswalks, do the street paving project, all those components, in order to be wrapped up on the time frame that we had been talking about all the way along, and that was the Memorial Day weekend, to have it wrapped up, and also tying into Motorcycle Week a few weeks after that, or 10 days after that, roughly. We also always knew that this was going to be the base course paving and striping. It very much is going to look as the project is finished. We will be going back in there post-Labor Day and doing the final wearing course of pavement and finishing the project up. But for all intents and purposes, the project would have the look of being completely done by that Memorial Day time. So we worked, when the numbers came in, we kind of looked into what was driving it. Eversource has been willing to come in and work with us. They are a valued partner with us on the project, and just to point out, they've been very cooperative with us, not only in this project, but on the LED streetlight conversion that we're going through right now. They've just made a significant investment in upgrading some poles and infrastructure for reliability, as well as having duplicate power sources, so redundancy, and to help keep our power in place. So they are a positive partner with us, and a good community relationship is what we've had with them for years, and we look to continue to have with them. Obviously, for budgeting purposes, this number far exceeded what we had planned, and we brought them to the table and had conversations about what was driving it and what we could do. So I can stop there. I know we have representatives from Eversource who are here today. We also have our Public Works Director and Assistant Director, Wes Anderson and Luke Powell. So happy to take it in whatever direction you'd like, Mr. Mayor.
All right, we welcome our guests from Eversource, and I guess if one of you is, we're going to have more than one, or is one going to be the representative for the company? You are? Okay. Why don't you come up and use this microphone here, if you would, please. Introduce yourself for the record.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Ramsey, R-A-M-S-E-Y. My position with the company is Vice President of Operations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I think the city manager did a very good job sort of giving you the timeline and the estimates as we go through. As you can well imagine, we do a lot of work throughout our over 200 cities and towns that we do work in. The typical process would be is there's an estimate given up front, and then when all of the work is completed, We take all the information of the work and then we compare it to the estimates. We don't have that information right now because the contractor is moving forward with the work being completed. There will be some additional overhead work done, I think, in the April timeframe. So it won't be until that time we get all the information back from the contractor and that types, with that said. But with that said, we have had a very good working relationship with Laconia. As I mentioned before, we operate in over 200 cities and towns. It's sometimes very, very difficult to work with town officials on these kinds of projects. That is not the case here. We've enjoyed a good working relationship, and our goal is to continue that good working relationships with not only the management of the city of Laconia, but with Laconia as a whole. You actually have a very good project. I love coming to Laconia. I think it'll look great. So with that said, let's continue having conversations and we can work this thing out. I have every confidence that that could happen.
So can you give the or someone on your team give the council some insight into how the nature of the discrepancy between the $311,000 number that Mr. Myers mentioned and the 700-plus number that ended up being the case?
Short of going through the full analysis that I described earlier, that's going to be difficult to do, and I would hate to speculate. I'd rather base it on fact. So if we did the work, we'd have some internal numbers and all that, but since a contractor have done this work, we need to have that information forward to us from all the contractor after the job is complete. And there's an additional piece, we also have to get the satisfaction of the city in order to make sure that they feel that the job is complete as well. Once that's all done, then we'll have the information and we can compare it to the estimate. But I don't have that information now.
So, my understanding, and one number that I'd like the council to understand, if I could, is my understanding when at our last meeting, the city manager provided council with the design estimate, copy the sheet of the design estimate in here. And one of the numbers on that sheet, so both the council and the public knows here in Laconia, the estimated hours on this job totaled out to a little under 1,500 hours is what was estimated. And my understanding is that when all was said and done and the two contractors that the city manager mentioned looked at the job, they indicated that number had been significantly underestimated in their opinion. Is that correct?
That number is
Your
a
understanding?
suspect when we do the analysis. That's going to be an area we're going to look at and particularly hard. One could, say, is the estimate wrong or is the actual correct? The fact that we got two contractors that bid on the job for the same specification and their estimates came very, very close suggests that their numbers, and when we finish the job, we'll know that for exactly what it's going to be. That probably is going to be the appropriate number.
So I would ask the same question of both of you. Do we have any, or of our Public Works people here, from what we know as of sitting here today, can we assume that the contractors' numbers are relatively close to what has actually been the case?
I believe that to be the more likely scenario, that in Eversource folks, and Paul can speak to this, but there is someone from Eversource down there who is a project manager and maybe a clerk of the works type of thing, and overseeing and tracking the hours. So the hours that the sub is working are being verified and tracked, and we're a good portion through the project. We do have some overhead, work to be doing and stuff still, but the majority of the project, again, my understanding, and Wes, please feel free to jump in if I'm saying something wrong here, that is the bulk of it's done. So it's just a matter of kind of tallying the hours, but I think the initial indication without digging into everything is that, yes, the numbers that the subs had identified are probably going to turn out to be the more realistic numbers versus the estimate. This was a not-to-exceed bid, so that's why it's being tabulated, and the actuals, will be tallied for that purpose. But all indications are it's leaning towards the additional hours and the additional cost.
Has the job been completed?
a portion of the job. Mostly the underground work, as to our knowledge, has been completed. There is some overhead work still to come, but it's not in the critical, what I call the critical path in what you're trying to accomplish for this spring.
Okay. So I'll open up to a question from the council, and Councilor Lippman has a question.
Actually, I think I have two. I guess the first one, in terms of, appreciate your first coming here today, and, you know, your posture of trying to work this through together. I guess in terms of just trying to understand what you were laying out, in terms of when, because we're also working on our city budget and trying to understand kind of where we stand financially, both retrospectively and prospectively, in terms of the time frame, in terms of reconciling it and doing the type of work that you need to do. And, what do you foresee as that time frame, so that we can sort of work through the issues?
So I guess what I would suggest we do is, you know, we have our processes, and I don't want to let our processes stand in the way of what you're trying to achieve. So we can have conversations with the city manager or whoever you designate and see if we can meet an agreement between the two of us that reaches your objective. That would be our goal. We've always had a good working relationship with Laconia. Our goal is to continue that working relationship, irrespective of our process.
So with that, I guess what I'm just trying to get a sense of is, do you see that as being like 2 weeks out, or 2 months, or 5 months, or 2 days?
You want to meet tonight, tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday, we're there for you.
Okay,
Whatever it takes.
okay.
That's why I'm here. That's my commitment.
Any other questions or
I'll try to work
comments
your
for
timetable.
Mr. Ramsey? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Councilor Hamel.
Thank you. I want to thank you for coming also. That means a lot to us, to see your concern about this project, because this is really a fantastic project that
is.
we're trying to do up there, and it's not inexpensive. It's an expensive one for the city to do. I guess kind of my question, I mean, the burying of underground cable and that there, I mean, your Eversource has got to be totally familiar with that. I mean, we're not the first city that this is.
That's true. However, I will tell you that my father's a carpenter by trade, and when he bid on houses, it was everything above ground, because he could predict exactly what the cost would be on a new house. Once you get into the ground, you never know what you're going to hit. And so, even with the years of experience we have, we're always cautious with the fact that underground, there are always surprises. Anybody who does a lot of underground work will tell you that. So it's a more unpredictable type of construction, and so we're just cautious about that as well.
But the underground part was actually done by Busby, so I mean, that was, whatever they found was
To a lot of
what
extent,
they did.
right.
Correct.
Right.
So, no,
But even
Conduit was late.
Conduit was laid, but even from the perspective of running the
Your
wires, you still got to get through the conduits, and it's not like you're in the bucket in the air, which is a lot easier to do. So it's more complicated to do underground.
okay. All right, well, I appreciate your, you coming and the people with you, and having the open mind of discussing this with us and see where we can.
No, we
But we can go with
want to
this.
continue to have this conversation, and we're looking to meet your objective.
Okay.
Councilor Bear.
I do notice that you have contingency fees included in your estimate. Apparently, they don't cover.
Not to this size. A difference.
Anyone else? Councilor Lippman.
Yes.
I guess follow up on just Council's Bear's question, unless you have one already ready.
No, I'll keep it.
I was just going to, I think what you're trying to get at is that, maybe it relates to your prior comment, is in terms of contingency, that assume that you use a typical average in when you're doing a budget estimate, and this one ran much different than your typical contingency did, is what you're telling us.
Yes.
Councilor Bounds.
Yes. Again, I join everybody else in thanking you for coming here. We appreciate the work that you've done with the city, and I, for one, and I think everyone here, wants to keep up a good relationship with Eversource today and on to tomorrow. I guess my only specific question is can you identify now, or is it something you're going to have to identify later, the exact reasons for the cost overruns, given the original estimate, the problems or that you may have encountered in terms of doing the work underground, running the conduits and that kind of stuff? Can you identify either precisely or imprecisely what the nature of the overruns is, or why it was, well, a lot more than we anticipated?
Again, I'll go back to, we want to do a complete analysis of what the estimate and what the actuals are. Once we get all the numbers from our contractor and we can sit down with them and go through it step by step and all the billings that we get from that, we then will use that and compare that to the estimate. I don't have that information right now.
Although clearly we know now that, as I said earlier, that the hours estimated to complete this job, for whatever reason, were...
The real source of the overruns.
Yes.
Right. I understand that. I'm just trying to get a handle on how we missed the mark. I won't say so badly, but we missed the mark a lot.
That'll be for their internal investigation to figure out why they're not, if it does turn out to be 3,000 hours instead of 1,500 hours, as to why. I mean, how could you estimate I assume you use some sort of computer program or something probably to estimate that sort of thing.
Yeah, the typical process is our engineers will go out and design the system, and we use computer programs as well as manual input into the whole process to eventually determine the, what we call the estimate for discussions with people, city managers or whoever's proposing the kind of project. So you have to look at the whole picture, not just a piece of it. And so would I look at the hours? Yes. You've hit on the key area that you would want to make sure you take a hard look at and have that kind of conversation. But there's a lot of other areas you would want to look at as well. Scope of work, who did the work, price per hour. We have a whole list of kinds of things that we look at. But we want to do it and deal with the facts as opposed to just speculate at this point in time.
Councilor Hamel?
Yes, thank you. I think part of the problem is where we're between a rock and a hard place as a city council is, we voted on, this is a summary of the cost summary of the different aspects of that job,
Okay.
of what we want to do. And the job is proceeding, and we as a council, I think, have to, depending on where this goes, of what here we may have to eliminate. And that's pretty much fast approaching because Busby Construction's moving right along. A lot of these things have to be ordered ahead of time. And so we have to make a decision on, depending on where this goes, what kind of treatments we do up there.
So give us a better understanding of what you're talking about, and let's talk.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, I would throw out to council at this point in time that, given the statements of both Mr. Ramsey and Mr. Myers have made here today, that the appropriate, we know approximately how much more money is going to be spent in this area of the project than we had anticipated to be spent. And given that and the timeliness of the issue as just outlined by Councilor Hamel in terms of needing to know what our obligation is going to be there relative to other decisions to be made on other parts of the project that haven't even been started yet, have been designed but not started, time is of the essence here, and I would recommend to the council that we decide this afternoon to authorize the city manager on behalf of the council and the city to enter into immediate conversations with Eversource in terms of deciding what the city's final obligation for paying this bill is going to be, and that the manager report back to us as soon as possible, even as soon as, hopefully, as Monday night when we meet again. So that would be my suggestion as to how we ought to proceed at this point in time, rather than talking about this in public and whatnot, and all the various aspects of it. I think we should just authorize the city manager to do that on our behalf and to get back us as soon as possible, hopefully by Monday night.
You need a
And you
motion
had
for that?
indicated that you all were prepared to,
We're prepared to talk to you at your schedule.
okay,
You need a motion for that?
yes,
Can I make that motion,
okay.
please?
So you got the wording on that, more or less? Okay, all right. Let's get a second before Counselor Bolduc seconds the motion. Counselor Lippman.
Just point of clarification on the motion, is the manager coming back to us with a proposal that we consider, or are we authorizing him to complete the negotiation?
We're not authorizing him to complete the negotiation. We are authorizing him to have those conversations with Eversource on an expedited basis and to report back to us as soon as possible. The final word would be to the council.
And happy to do that, and certainly we'll work on the expedited pace on that, because Monday night, depending on where this goes, we will be asking you to make decisions about remaining parts of the project, because if we don't make decisions on Monday, we don't meet again until April 10th, and the next phase of the project regarding sidewalks and bump outs and those types of things. I know Busby is looking to hopefully be down there and start doing some work first of the week. They've been moving some snow around to try to facilitate melting down there, and after this last storm. So we are at that crunch time where, in order to meet the remainder of the schedule and be completed by Memorial Day, he's pulling all hands on deck to get this done under our timeframe.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, we have a motion on the floor and seconded. All those in favor, please raise a hand. We have 6 votes in the affirmative, the motion carries. We thank you for being here today and all your colleagues. And we'll hopefully look forward to a report from the manager on Monday night when we meet. We'll have that on the
I do
agenda.
want to thank you for your time, and give us a call, we'll get together, we'll work things out.
Okay, my
right,
pleasure.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other business to come before this meeting today? Okay, before we adjourn, I'm going to note that we need to have a short meeting immediately after this. That's euphemistically referred to by law as a non-meeting, and for our audience, that means that there are certain subjects that a public body can discuss in private in not an official meeting setting where the public is excluded, and one of those areas is contract negotiations with unions. And so we need to have a quick conversation with the city manager about contract negotiations. So I will thank all of you for coming and indicate that the council needs to meet in private for a few minutes, please. Need a motion to adjourn the meeting? Moved by Councilor Bullock, seconded by Councilor Bear. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, and we are adjourned. So the official meeting is over, and so we will begin our unofficial non-meeting
What a waste of
as soon as the
time.
room is clear.